Hi everyone, get comfortable and let me take you into today's stories. My manipulative ex came crawling back after being scammed by the same girl he scammed. Last Wednesday, Harry called me while I was at work. Tanya, I have to cancel our dinner tonight. My parents flew in from Portugal this morning. They want to meet with me privately and talk about something important. That sounded strange to me. In all 8 months of our relationship, he had mentioned his parents maybe twice. He never said they lived in Portugal. He never talked about visiting them or them coming to see him. Every time I asked about his family, Harry quickly shut the conversation down. That evening, I drove over to his apartment. His Camaro wasn't parked outside. I'd been paying the insurance on that car for 3 months. I called him. No answer. I texted, asking if everything was okay with his parents. 2 hours later, he finally replied, "The conversation is taking longer than expected. I'll call you tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt very wrong. Lately, Harry had been acting differently. Colder, more distant. He used to text me constantly throughout the day, but over the last 2 weeks, his messages had become short and rare. On Thursday morning, I opened Instagram, and there it was. A new post from Harry. A picture taken at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. The caption, "Family dinner." In the corner of the photo, you could see a woman's hand, but it wasn't his mom's. The nails were painted bright red, and she wore rings I knew I'd seen before. I zoomed in. The hand clearly belonged to a young woman. The rings were delicate, expensive, definitely not something a woman in her 50s would wear. I racked my brain, trying to remember where I'd seen them before. Later, I scrolled further through Harry's profile. I found older pictures from before we started dating. In several, he was with a blonde named Stella. Her profile was public. I looked at her recent posts, and everything clicked. Those exact same rings were on her fingers in many of her photos. I learned that Stella had moved to Seattle 8 months ago, right around the time Harry and I started dating. But her latest posts showed she had returned to our city 3 weeks ago. That was exactly when Harry started pulling away from me. That's when I realized. The hand in the restaurant photo was Stella's. His ex. The one he swore meant nothing to him. On Friday night, I decided to see it for myself. I called Harry and suggested we go to Romano's for dinner. He immediately refused, saying it was too expensive. Even though I had always been the one paying for our dinners, so at 7:30 I drove to Romano's, the same time he had posted the night before. I parked across the street and waited. At 8:15, his Camaro pulled up. He got out with an older couple in that same blonde, Stella. I pulled my hoodie up, put on a baseball cap, and went inside. The hostess sat me at a table right next to theirs. I kept my head down, hiding under the hood. Harry was holding Stella's hand across the table. The middle-aged woman, who I assumed was his mother Priscilla, smiled warmly at her. His father, Leonard, raised his glass as if to make a toast. "Mom, Dad, this is Stella, the love of my life." "We're back together," Harry said. Priscilla clapped her hands. "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart. But what about that other girl, Tanya?" Harry burst into laughter. Leonard laughed loudly too, sipping his wine. "That pathetic girl? She's just my ATM on legs. I've been using her for months while winning Stella back. She pays for everything." I quietly turned on the recorder on my phone under the table. I needed to capture every word. My car, my clothes, even my phone bill. All on her dime, Harry continued. "Next week, I'll dump her when Stella moves in with me." Leonard nodded with pride. "Smart boy. Why work when some desperate girl is willing to pay for everything? Now that's clever." And they all laughed together. I sat there, stunned. 8 months of my life? For this. Later that night, around 2 a.m., Harry showed up at my door. Soaking wet, broken, pathetic. "Tanya, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please let me stay for a few days. I'll sleep on the couch, I'll clean, I'll do whatever you want. Just give me a safe place to get back on my feet." I couldn't hold it in. I laughed, loudly, uncontrollably. You honestly think I'd do anything for you? After all the times you humiliated me? After you spent months telling me your life was perfect without me? I reminded him of every insult. Every time he made me feel worthless. Every moment he flaunted his happiness with Stella in my face. You called me a walking ATM, Harry. You told your parents I was pathetic. You said even my touch made you sick. And now you want me to save you? Tears filled his eyes. He swore he never meant it, that he only said those things to impress Stella and his parents. Claimed that deep down he had always cared for me. I didn't care. I pulled out my phone and started filming him. That pitiful man, crying in my living room, admitting his perfect relationship was a sham. I posted the video on TikTok with the caption, POV, your manipulative ex crawls back after the girl he left you for plays him the same way he played you. The video started gaining views instantly. Harry noticed I was recording and panicked, begging me not to post it. He was terrified his parents would find out the truth, but that only made me want to capture every second of his humiliation. I told him he had exactly 5 minutes to leave my apartment, or I would call the police and report an intruder. When he tried to argue, I reminded him about my security cameras and that Kristen would gladly testify about his aggressive behavior. That night, Harry left completely crushed. And honestly, it was true. He had nothing left. No money, no home, no girlfriend, no future. Just his parents, who now had to face the fact their son was a total failure. The next morning, I saw him again, sitting on the steps outside my building. When he spotted me, he jumped up. Tanya, please help me. I've got nowhere to live. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. I looked at him, this broken excuse of a man, and felt no sympathy. This was the same person who laughed with his parents about how easily I fell for his manipulation. The one who told me I'd never be good enough. If you need money, go beg on the street, I told him. Maybe then you'll finally know what it feels like to be used and thrown away. I got in my car and drove off, leaving him sitting there with his head in his hands. He kept showing up near my building after that, each time looking more worn down. Kristen told me he even offered neighbors odd jobs for pocket change. But the funniest part happened just recently. I came home from work and saw him sitting there again. He looked terrible, but suddenly straightened up and said, "Remember this, Tanya. When I'm back on my feet, you'll be begging me to take you back. You'll see what you lost." I laughed right in his face. This homeless, filthy, smelly man, who clearly hadn't bathed in weeks, was threatening me with his fantasy about some grand comeback. "There's a McDonald's 2 blocks away," I told him. "Maybe if you ask nicely, they'll give you a free burger." And I walked away, leaving him there. Now he finally knows what it feels like to be used and discarded. Now he's experienced the humiliation himself. Karma always finds the people who deserve it. 3 months ago, Malcolm began calling his behavior jokes whenever I questioned his actions. It all started back in September when I asked him not to flirt with girls at parties. He laughed and told his friends that I was obsessed with him. Dean, Randall, and Curtis found it hilarious and started making playful comments about clingy girls whenever I was around. Malcolm began testing boundaries, dancing with other girls at the bar, winking at me from afar, and even giving his number to random girls right in front of me. When I confronted him, he insisted I was overreacting to normal social situations, shaking his head as if I were crazy. His friends always backed him up unconditionally. At Curtis's birthday party last weekend, his ex, Sabrina, showed up wearing a tight red dress. They had been texting for weeks, though he insisted it was purely friendly. I saw her touch his arm while talking, tracing her fingers over his bicep. Malcolm kept glancing at me and smiling, while Dean and Randall stood nearby with their phones, recording everything. The party was packed with students from our college and neighboring schools. Malcolm had been drinking nonstop since we arrived at 8 and kept buying Sabrina drinks, completely ignoring me for hours. Every time I tried to join their conversation, he would turn away or change the topic. Around 11, he grabbed Sabrina by the waist and pulled her close, kissing her with an open mouth for 30 seconds, holding her hips tightly. Dean and Randall started shouting, "She deserved it," while filming me on camera. Everyone around watched. Some laughed, others looked uncomfortable. Malcolm pulled back and looked at me. "Just a joke, babe," he said, smiling. Sabrina whispered something to him, and he pulled her close again. I made my way through the crowd to the exit. People stepped aside, staring, while my phone exploded with messages. By the time I got home, 15 messages from Malcolm had arrived. "You're ruining my night. Come back and apologize to Sabrina. Stop overreacting. Everyone thinks you're unstable. You humiliated me in front of my friends. Learn to take an innocent joke." When I checked my phone in the morning, he had posted 6 Instagram stories between midnight and 3 a.m. Videos of him dancing with random girls, close-ups of their dancing, captions like, "This is what happens when you try to control me." The last story showed him doing shots with 3 different girls. Single life feels completely different. He tagged Dean, Randall, and Curtis in every post. At 3 a.m., he appeared outside my house, knocking on the door, yelling my name, waking the neighbors. When I opened it, he smelled of alcohol, cigarettes, and perfume. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair sticking out in all directions. "You're mentally unstable," he said. "Every guy cheats sooner or later. At least I did it openly." Then he staggered to his car and drove off. After that, numerous episodes of manipulation, humiliation, stalking, and non-stop messages began. Malcolm tried to convince me he was teaching me trust, using friends and even family to pressure me. I realized I would no longer allow him to control or demean me. Over time, I planned my own response, which completely dismantled his manipulations. I used his own habits and desire for control against him, setting a trap that he fell into himself. He finally understood. I was no longer the girl who could be intimidated or dominated. All his attempts to claim it was a joke or peer influence failed. I gathered evidence, videos, messages, and witness statements. Malcolm saw the consequences of his behavior and realized he could no longer use me for his amusement or control. When I finally watched the party videos, my heart raced. They recorded everything. How he pulled Sabrina close, how she laughed and touched him, how he kissed her with an open mouth. Dean and Randall shouted and laughed, filming me on camera. These were not just recordings, they were proof of deliberate, intentional humiliation. Malcolm ignored me in front of everyone. His actions were deliberate. Every gesture, every wink, every kiss. Tools of control. I began collecting evidence. Messages, Instagram stories, videos from Dean and Randall. I realized they could reveal his true nature. His behavior was a script where he was the star, and I appeared inadequate. I noticed details I had previously overlooked. How he drew others' attention to my reactions. Laughter, cues, comments about my drama. Everything worked in his favor. I started planning my reaction. Instead of an emotional outburst, I relied on facts. Messages, videos, and screenshots to show trusted witnesses or authorities. At the same time, I regained control of my life. No contact without my permission, no surprises, no pressure. I refused to let him manipulate my emotions. Every joke or lesson in trust now appeared for what it really was: humiliation and manipulation. Strength didn't come immediately. The first days were full of fear, but gradually I saw the results of my preparation. He no longer controlled me. I learned to respond calmly and rationally. The climax came when I shared the evidence with people I trusted. They saw everything, confirmed my perspective, and Malcolm could no longer convince anyone he was the victim. His control crumbled. I realized this is not just a story about humiliation or betrayal. It's a story about recognizing toxic relationships, collecting evidence, and reclaiming control over your life, even when you're being demeaned in front of everyone. Malcolm realized his jokes no longer worked. I became someone unafraid to set boundaries and defend myself, no matter the manipulations or fear.